This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
We will call this meeting to order. Welcome to the December 2nd, 2019 meeting of the Eau Claire Plan Commission. This meeting is being broadcast live by the Valley Media Works on Charter Channel 994, WRFP-LP 101.9 FM, and online at valleymediaworks.org. The Plan Commission attempts to conduct its hearings in a relatively informal manner within the constraint that we must deal with the issues before us in an orderly and businesslike fashion. We give the applicant an opportunity to speak first, then others, either for or against the proposal, are each permitted to speak once. We do request that everyone restrict their comments to the issues before us, avoid unnecessary repetition, and be prudent in the use of time. We want to be sure to have adequate time to review and discuss all items with equal diligence. We have three items for public hearing today and a couple of items for public discussion. Please turn your cell phones to off or silent during the meeting so we're not disrupted by that. And if you do plan to speak tonight, please take one of the yellow slips of paper in the back, fill that out, and give it to Mr. Petrie up here in the front. We also ask that you introduce yourself with your name and address when you come up to the podium. So with that, we'll begin with item number 1, which was postponed from October 14th Plan Commission meeting. It is a public hearing for recommendation to City Council regarding a rezone from TR1A to C3P and R3P at the west end of Lorch Avenue. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Again, before this evening is both a request to rezone a number of properties at the western end of Lorch Avenue, as well as to adopt the general development plan for both commercial multifamily development and approve the certified survey map. You can see here item number 1, kind of bottom of the screen. That's at that western terminus of Lorch Avenue, just south of Interstate 94. So here's an aerial view of the properties and area in question. Again, just west of the Florian Gardens property, and again at that end and proposed extension of Lorch Avenue. Here's the current zoning, which is TR1A. The applicant is looking to rezone to C3P and R3P. We'll get into a little more details of that here in just a moment. Here's the overall notification area. Properties, again, essentially just on the south side of the interstate. Here's the proposed certified survey map. Kind of park here for just a moment as I start with some of the comments. Again, the applicant, part of this is proposing a 4-lot CSM, 3 commercial lots. They're on the north side of the proposed extended Lorch Avenue. They would be in size 2 acres, 3.35 acres, and 4.63 acres. Kind of going from east to west. Lot 1 is the 4.63 acres. Lot 2 is 2 acres, and then Lot 3 on the west end would be 3.35 acres. And then on the south side would be proposed 30.14 acre lot for residential development. In terms of the commercial, starting with that, the 3 commercial lots have been indicated through this that the businesses would range in size from 2,000 to 16,000 square feet, and would include a mix of retail, sales and service, office, personal services, institutional, and vehicle services. So nothing proposed more specifically at this point, but did want to highlight what the applicant has discussed thus far. Before I get any further, just again a reminder, this was, as Mr. Chair, as you noted, This is a rehearing or continuation of the hearing that was postponed back on October 14th. And again, a lot of that having to do at that time is due to a lack of details. Again, the applicant has provided significantly more details in advance of tonight's meeting. Here's the planned land use map. It's a little bit hard to show this a little more zoomed in, but you can see the general area just north of that green large area, Lowe's Creek County Park, and you can see, thank you, Ryan, the mix of the commercial there, and then moving west to the medium high density housing. So with that, again, this is a transitional area from that mixture of commercial to medium high density residential. Staff has indicated to the applicant previous discussions and communications that the project needs to include a variety of housing types, densities, and building configurations, and provided some of that guidance from the comprehensive plan in page 2 of the staff report. Here's the overall proposed layout from the general development plan. As shown here, there'd be approximately 13.77 acres of developable area for the residential area, I should say, in the south end, or south side, and it would preserve about 16.37 acres as passive open space along Lowe's Creek itself. You can see they're essentially listed as a wetland / floodplain. Again, this revised residential development or general development plan proposed having 4 separate 3-story buildings ranging from 40 to 65 units per building. The units themselves would consist of 3 different types of units, studio, 1 and 2 bedrooms, along with some that would have also direct entry. The applicant did note that the first phase, buildings 1 and 2, which are in the middle there, kind of bookended by future buildings 3 and 4, would primarily be aimed at market rate renters. However, the second phase may consider workforce housing based on what they call future building analysis and demand. So again, that's their kind of summary of their target demographic. The first phase, again, buildings 1 and 2 would each have 65 units, so a total of 130 units. Overall, all 4 buildings would have a maximum of 228 units in those 2 phases. Just highlighted that more specifically, that this would be 16.56 units per acre, which is underneath that maximum density of 21 units per acre allowed in the R3. So this is a revision from what you previously saw. It's a decrease in the density quite a bit, so it's not requesting any deviation from density standards. So based on what staff has seen here, it does appear to be in compliance with the density standards. With that, here's some elevations just to show kind of the massing of these buildings. Again, as you can see here, buildings 1 and 2 are primarily identical, or at least mirror images of each other. Buildings 3 and 4 do provide what looks to be a variation in the footprint, but still rather large scale units. In terms of your consideration here tonight, Plan Commission should consider the project phasing and a review of the mix of uses to encourage a transition to lower density on the western end and a greater diversity in building types. So those are some additional comments staff would have in reviewing this initial or revised proposal here before you this evening. This agenda item will be considered by City Council at its meeting next Monday. And in terms of future steps, final site plan approval will still be needed in the future as well. Should also note a thorough review by the engineering department is provided as well. There are a number of conditions that are recommended for your consideration here tonight as well. Those are 6 different conditions. And again, planning staff is in concurrence with those for your consideration here tonight. And with that, I believe the applicant is here, hopefully to answer some questions as well, if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And is the applicant here? Welcome back.
Good evening, Commission. Mark Erickson, Everyday Surveying and Engineering, representing HK Development. As you probably recognize, I've been here about this project. We did encompass more detail in the second go-around here, an architectural rendering of the site plan, identifying the numbers of units, like Mr. Allen did a great job in explaining this, reducing the density out there in the developable land south of the road. I just because we're recycling a little bit, I'm going to talk about that point of the transition. Due to the proximity of how this land sits on the sliver of land we're working with here, because as we go westerly from building 2 to 4 and move down, we get into what I guess I'd call topographically as a funnel. The plateau gets pretty small north and south in dimensions, okay? And we see that the transition from the type of buildings and units would best be identified on a future development to the west of the site. There's give or take a 17-acre plateau up there, not owned by HK or anything like that, but a future piece of land that would be developable to go into maybe the 12s, the 8s, the twins, and something like that. We also talked about that last go-around that this would probably be a permanent dead end because there's no real viable option for the road to pass to Lois Creek Road, i.e. over the road and through some private property, over the river, I should say. So coupled with being a highway commercial C3 district, and the R3 does fit in this area really well. Once again, we don't have the north and south depth to take buildings 3 and 4 or 2 and 4 and really transition from an R3 back to an R2, back to an R1 or anything like that. So we understand that the city would like to see some transition. We are trying to do our best as in giving building variations, but we truly see the transitioning of the different housing types as the road and the city expands to the west.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the commission? I have one. Do you know of any objections to these conditions?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your time tonight, folks.
Is there anyone from the public who came to speak on this item tonight? Welcome.
Hi, I'm Dean Fraze. The 17 acres the gentleman was talking about to the west, I own. So my concern is the traffic because it's one way in and one way out on Lorch Road. So, you know, it's just got to be, you know, keep that in mind. So when mine gets developed, and it will, you know, it'll get annexed into the city and it will be developed also. But the traffic thing's a big concern of mine. So that's really all that I have to say, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the commission? I see none. Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public that came to speak on this item? All right. With that, I'll see if there is a motion on the commission to bring this item before us. Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. I move for approval with staff recommendations.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Peterson.
I'll second it.
All right. Thank you. Any discussion? Commissioner Wolfgram.
Thank you, Chairman Larson. So my concern is the same. I could not vote yes on this, given the large number of units. There are 130 in Phase 1. Again, this is an area of high employment, low-wage workers, many part-time workers. Fleet Farm, Action City, Florian Gardens, Metropolis Hotel, restaurants, and others, including those that the applicant is considering for their commercial space as a hotel, senior living, amongst other businesses. If I would see a commitment in Phase 2 to a certain percentage of units that are workforce housing, then I could vote yes, but not quote-unquote based on future analysis, when we already know that in Eau Claire, which I've mentioned a number of times, that according to the American Community Survey, that we have at least 31,000 workers in these low-pay, high-employment occupations, and that's just under 40% of our workforce. A lot of these folks are very cost-burdened and paying over 50% of their income on housing. So I am not opposed to luxury market rate housing in any way, but as our Chippewa Valley Affordable Housing Task Force recommends, the most acute need is for quality rental housing that's affordable for people of lower income. So again, I could not vote yes unless I saw an actual commitment to workforce housing in phase 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion from the commission? I would just point out regarding the traffic that some of the conditions included in here are a traffic impact analysis and a development agreement between the city and the developer for funding of the traffic capacity improvement identified as necessary by the traffic impact analysis. So hopefully that helps. Seeing no further discussion, I'll check one more time. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to just add one more clarification. I neglected to mention that the plan development, the PD portion of the zoning, the rezoning request, the applicant has noted that they don't anticipate anything in terms of deviations from setbacks, again, density or anything like that, beyond perhaps building height as they move forward with the site plan process. So just for reference, for example, R3 building height maximum is 45 feet. So again, I just want to make that clarification. That was in your materials, but I did not make that clear in my presentation.
Okay, thank you. I'll check one more time for questions or comments from the commission. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Commissioner Wolfgram. Thank you. Congratulations. Item number 2 is a public hearing for recommendation to the City Council rezoning from TR 1A and R1 to R1P for the Woodland Hills Estates on the north side of Seymour, east of Andover Avenue. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Again, before you this evening with agenda item 2, you can see here this moving north from where we were with the last agenda item, north of the Eau Claire River, east of Hastings Way, and west of the bypass. Again, more immediately located north of Seymour Road and east of Andover Avenue. You can see here zoning request is what's before you this evening, a rezoning request, as well as the general development plan for reduced front yard setback related to the plat before you as well. Here's an aerial. This may look familiar. There have been a variety of approvals before you over the last several months, including some annexations, rezonings, and such, in terms of placing these properties all together to unify into one proposed project here this evening. The property itself is just under 21 acres in size. Existing zoning, again, the area in question, is a mix of TR 1A and R1. Again, the applicant is looking to rezone to R1P, with that P really designating a reduction in front yard setbacks from the required 30 feet down to 20 feet. And I'll get into that a little bit more here in a moment. Again, the project itself is comprised of 4 vacant lots. You can see a little bit more clearly here. Again, it's located east of Andover Avenue, immediately north, adjacent to Seymour Road. Water and sanitary sewer services are available along Andover to the west there. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Again, the applicant recently annexed the northern 2 parcels. A little bit hard to see, but thank you. We're missing a pointer on this thing, so that's part of the issue here. So thanks, Ryan. Yeah, those 2 parcels were annexed in from the town of Seymour recently. And again, there are also some rezoning approvals for the southern 2 parcels. The applicant has indicated a spring 2020 construction moving forward here. Again, the general development plan, which also serves as a preliminary plat, consists of the 20 single-family residential lots. Show the notification boundary here. I'll come back to that here briefly as well. Here are the 20 lots in question. You can see for phase 1, which is to the right of your screen, excuse me. I tried to include a north arrow here too. Apologies to the surveyor for kind of chopping up their drawing, but trying to zoom in on the specific drawing in particular. Again, with this, the applicant is proposing a subdivision name of Woodland Hills Estates. Proposes a cul-de-sac extension of the current Dedham Street, which is proposed to be renamed Craven Court. That's the essentially the primary, if not only, road through this subdivision. There is the extension of Essex. You can see the bulb there to the bottom right. Thank you. You may have, again, you've seen that portion move forward before through other approvals prior to this. So with that, again, the applicant is requesting to reduce this front yard setbacks from 30 feet down to 20 feet. In particular, as you can see here, due to the severity and proximity of steep slopes throughout the project. You can see that there in the shaded area. So looking to reduce the front yard setback to pull the houses and allow some more room in the front and avoid those steep slopes that really you can see are surrounding the whole proposed subdivision. I did include some specific, kind of pulled out some of the unique items from the engineering department report, which again, that's included in your entirety immediately following the overall staff report. There are 4 recommended conditions. Again, staff is all in concurrence with those. Just wanted to identify again some of the specific items of note without replicating the entire engineering staff report or memorandum. Again, the streets, they're proposing this extended cul-de-sac, and there are some issues there related to some steeper grades greater than 10%. So there's a recommendation to make sure that topography is taken into consideration moving forward. Storm drainage as well, taking that into consideration. Of course, grading in particular, you can see here with the steep slopes and environmentally sensitive areas identified here already. Did want to note too that the site is located just under 1/3 of a mile from Route 4 transit line, which runs along Seymour Road. It is expected to generate a minimal demand for public transit, but did want to identify where that is. Again, 20 single-family lots being proposed here this evening. So with that, just jumping back real quickly to this, I did receive just one phone call from a property owner of vacant property off Barbara Jean Drive, which is to the northwest of this property. Barbara Jean Drive, so we'll show here, thank you, is unimproved. So again, a neighboring property owner was primarily inquiring about utility extension and placement. So responded to that question. Again, no comment in favor or against beyond just questions about utility extensions. So with that, bounce back to this drawing and stay here for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Christopherson.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Allen, this is just an opportunity to educate me. I know that in previous testimony, there was a concern about removal of the wooded area that's right across the road, it looks like that's not going to be developed. Is that correct?
It appears that way. Again, I might defer to the applicant in terms of how precise this drawing is. Again, it is from their surveyor, so presuming it's been fairly well identified in terms of where those steep slopes are. Again, that doesn't necessarily preclude any work being done on those steep slopes, simply just here highlighting where their intended primary construction would occur.
May I have a follow-up?
But yes, it would show, you can jump back here, more preservation than not, of course, of the wooded area. But again, I'll defer to the applicant to speak to that more specifically.
My other question is, when the engineering report talked about the precautions of construction in sensitive areas, obviously, once construction is completed, in perpetuity, there's all of that sensitive area that now has housing right next to it. So what typically does the city do to preserve areas like that, or are there any covenants that can be placed on a development like this that would give further protection for sensitive areas once they're developed?
It's a very good question. I may defer to our engineering staff. Ms. Ness?
That is a very good question. We would work through our development agreement to identify if there are needs from the drainage report to address potential for erosion, making sure that the erosion control is proper and throughout the project and then after the project as well. Some instances that we've done in the past is recommendations on how to control the water in the steep sloped areas. So we would work with the developer on identifying those alternatives as well.
Any other questions from the commission for staff? All right, thank you.
Actually,
Oh,
I got one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Allen, I was wondering about the Essex Street as it relates to the approvals in front of us here. Is this at all related to like, are the setbacks related to that as well, or are we just talking about this new proposed street?
Very good question. The applicant has not made any differentiation between any of the lots, simply looking for the reduced setback for all lots before you this evening. That's a very good question. They did not exclude lots 11 and 16.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, we'll check one more time for questions from the commission for staff. All right, thank you. Is the applicant here? Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Hahn with J Development Group. I appreciate you considering our consideration of this preliminary plat. We own a construction company called Holland Brothers Construction as well, and so this is kind of our first foray into land development and contributing to the single-family homes in Eau Claire, so we're pretty excited about it. I think Scott did a really good job of talking about essentially what we're looking to do, and so I'll start with just addressing the questions that were previously stated. So the reason that we're asking for the 20-foot setback is so that we can maintain as many trees as possible. The line that you see there, essentially what we've done is we've gone up there to determine how we can keep as many trees as possible for multiple reasons. Number one, we want to preserve the sensitive areas. And number two, the lots are more likely to be saleable if people think they're living in kind of their own little winter haven. So it is our utmost importance to try to keep all of the trees to the extent that we can. And as you guys have seen a number of things come through over the last year, I'd say. It's taken about a year to kind of get this to fruition. We didn't own that parcel on the back. There were about 5 acres. So yeah, we own just to the edge of the hill, and then that whole steep slope, and then a little bit further out we didn't own. In talking with the engineering department and Leah, they thought that that would be an important piece to have for a couple reasons, primarily erosion control. So while it was a little bit different than our budget anticipated, that was of utmost concern given some of the other experiences we've had in previous years with erosion control. So our thought process with the trees there is to maintain as many trees as we can. I've walked the grounds a number of times with a forestry management individual, and he actually said that you should probably, some of that land should have been managed from a forest perspective quite a bit of time ago, kill some of the old poplar and then allow new poplar to come up in 2 to 3 years. I'm kind of deferring to him on what we should keep, what we shouldn't keep. So from that slope down, at this time, we plan on keeping all of that vegetation. And really what we did when we staked out the land is we got the center of the road line, and we basically figured off about the setback plus additional 70 feet, so you can have about 50 feet for a house and then another 20 feet for backyard. And those are the only trees that we're gonna try to, those are the ones that we have to take down to actually do what we wanna do. So as it relates to the 20-foot setbacks, we are asking for those setbacks on the entire subdivision. I'm not sure if I think I've addressed all the questions, but if you guys have any additional ones, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Any questions from the commission? I see none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who came to speak on this item tonight? Welcome
Good
back.
evening again, folks. Still Mark. Thanks for hearing this. Talking with Andrew and all that is of his utmost concern to try to keep this a very pristine area. We don't want to disturb the sensitive slopes. 2 elements related to the engineering and/or a question related to the staff review process. One of them, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Ness, is on the westerly side or the downside of the map, the sensitive areas appear to end abruptly against the right-of-way. And the reason behind that is there is a little hardship in determining that area. It has been modified by man, cut, manipulated to get the driveway access up to that existing house. So the fine line of what's man-made, what's not, when we get boots on the ground and really start to sit down with an engineering and stormwater analysis with the city, we'll look at addressing how we want to manage that and how to, if we need to modify it at all there, but they've been manipulated. So that was one of them. With regards to the gradient of the road, right now, we don't foresee exceeding 10%. I mean, we'll probably even keep it down a little bit, 9.95, something like that. So we don't need to really ramp it up or anything to exceed the city's standards of the gradient of a road. Stormwater management, we are, as Outlot 1 on the, what would be predominantly the west side and the north end of the project there, will manage all of this subdivision, these 20 lots here. And then we also are looking at Outlot 2 to prepare for the future plats as the project moves northerly down onto the other properties. So we are going to work on constructing Outlot 2 and 1 for stormwater management, which will tie back in, meeting all the standards of the city system downstream on and over there. So guess if you have any questions, folks.
Okay. Any questions from the commission? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public who came to speak on this item tonight? Okay. I'll see if there's a motion from the commission to put this on the table.
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Granlund? All right, any discussion? Commissioner Christopherson?
Thank you. This isn't discussion, but it is a comment. I just find this to be an interesting development from the perspective of people that like development that's new but in a wooded area so that you feel like you're tucked in somewhere. But you're developing right in an established neighborhood, so the chances of that changing over time is very small. And I just think people will love that.
Very good. Any other comments? All right, then we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. Item number 3 is a public hearing for recommendation to the City Council an amendment to the multifamily housing design manual in the core neighborhoods of the city of Eau Claire. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you tonight is the last step. We started this about 18 months ago. It's been quite of a process dealing with the neighborhoods, dealing with architects, developers, and staff review. Before you tonight would be the recommendation to City Council next Monday for the adoption. Tonight we'll go over where we have been, the process up to this point, trends within the existing neighborhoods, established neighborhoods. In particular, neighborhoods we're talking about are East Side Hill, Historic Randall Park, 3rd Ward, North Riverfronts, North Side Hill, Mount Washington, and Upper West Side. Also, we're going to go through the examples of the proposed changes before you tonight, and then goals of the changes, and then moving forward for 2020. The process started, like I mentioned, 18 months ago, dealing with the neighborhood association, citizens, developers, architects, you name it. You guys have been involved. It's been before you 3 times. We had 2 meetings with the neighborhood associations, developers, stakeholders. Most of them were at the library, and we had pretty good turnout for the first couple. And like I said, tonight is the last step. How we started this whole process, it was in the work plan in 2017, I believe. And hopefully we can get this approved at council next week. Most of the time is for reconsidering of redevelopment sites or infill sites in existing core neighborhoods, not suburban Eau Claire. Also, like I mentioned, you guys have been involved since the beginning. It was your recommendation to move this forward for an update and come up with the standards, and staff has provided assistance accordingly. Trends real quick, I'll just go over this pretty quickly. Density and scale has been questioned by this commission, by staff, by developers, and also by neighborhood associations. What does density and scale mean within existing neighborhoods or within existing blocks? Chippewa Street is a very good example of that in Historic Randall Park. This commission had a difficult time in 2015 approving the first project, which was the 800 block of Chippewa Street. That was before this commission 5 times before it was approved. Also, most new development within the core neighborhoods does not include garages, but we have included those standards for alleys or for attached garages. We also have a difficult time for compatibility within surrounding areas, within surrounding blocks, and neighborhood plans do assist with that, but this would be a guide for this commission to review all site plans going forward. Also, you may have been on this commission before in previous years. Design and architecture details could be lacking on newer structures depending on the proposal. Since 2015, 17 site plans have been before this commission within the core neighborhoods. We have denied approximately 6 of those, mostly in Randall Park neighborhood. And as you can imagine, most of the projects are in the historic Randall Park neighborhood. 5 site plans have been approved by staff because they're duplex development. So now we're switching gears. We're going to go over the changes which are in your packet. Staff has reviewed these. The attorney's office has reviewed them. Now it's before you. You have seen these in the past. Now the wording may have changed. We are still updating all the wording, making sure in the end this commission would be the last approval. So when a site plan does get submitted to our office, we work with the developer. We note concerns of not only the neighborhood plan, but also these guidelines and the existing guidelines in the multifamily design manual. So moving forward, we will be reviewing more with these guidelines in the core neighborhoods, like I mentioned. Density were reviewed in infill development, should be compatible with the existing neighborhood. Style and appearance should be considered along the public street and along the public alley. Compatibility, again, like I mentioned before, about building height, scale, density, designing affordability and sustainability for long-term. We would prefer these single or multifamily projects to last over 100 years, potentially. And then also massing and material use within the neighborhood. These would be your guiding principles within this proposal. And then you'd get into the review of the proposal. This is a property on Menominee Street that was built in 2012. Most of you may be aware of this project. It was one of the larger 4-unit developments with a common entry off the front and a common entry off the back. Does this fit in with the neighborhood along that block? Is it in compliance with the standards that we have in place? Would it be in compliance with these standards? Is something this organization or this commission would have to judge. But we would encourage similar height, similar massing, similar size to the existing neighborhood. Footprint should be compatible as well. Most of the time with these 4 units, they take down more than one structure, like you've seen on Chippewa Street and on Menominee Street for this proposal. So is that consistent and compatible to the surrounding rest of the neighborhood or within that block is something that we need to judge going forward, and we have done that in the past. Exterior materials should be considered as well to be more consistent with the core neighborhoods. Building entrances, like I mentioned here, this has a porch with a common entrance leading to the 4-unit apartment, and they just have one door facing the street and one door facing the alley. The standards are provided in your packet. This is another project. This was a Chippewa Street project where they ripped down 2 houses. They actually ripped down more than that, but to replace this structure, they ripped down 2 and proposed this 4-unit apartment as well. They did a decent job, staff believes, with the window design. They also did a vertical configuration within those windows, similar to what you have throughout the neighborhood in Randall Park. We should also recommend all windows facing all sides. I believe this commission reviewed 1 duplex in the core neighborhood. I believe it was last year or 2 years ago. They were proposing no windows on the sides. Shutters could be used potentially given this location. Again, these are some of the review criteria within your packet. Roof design should be considered as well. We don't want just flat roofs or no peak roofs. Also gable roofs and hips roofs could be considered. And overhangs should also be encouraged. Most of the time they're 12 to 18 inches overhangs. Getting more into solar consideration and sustainability, long-term sustainability. We did approve a project by staff on Niagara Street. That was the first one that I know of where they did consider and they actually installed solar panels on it. It is a duplex on the corner of 2nd and Niagara Street. But not only should we consider solar access to the existing proposed development, but also adjacent neighboring buildings. Also talk about encouraging electrical services for hybrid and electric vehicles going forward. And like I mentioned, not many of the projects that we review are for garages, but we should have similar material if it is a detached garage to the existing proposal. And also encourage windows. Getting into the landscaping and open space, most of the projects that we review require foundation plantings, which would be shrubs or perennials or annuals in the front yard. Also, it's 2 street trees typically. We also prefer a mixture of landscaping materials and plantings with variety of height and different plant materials. So what is the goal of this going forward? Really, the goal is to set a level playing field for not only this commission, but also the neighborhood associations, the developers, and the surrounding neighborhoods that would be affected by this. Also, this would, again, be a guide. In the end, this commission would have the authority to approve or not approve or approve with conditions, or you would postpone a site plan like you have done in the past. Also, every proposal within the core neighborhoods would be reviewed with these standards. Staff would make their staff report like we currently do. We would add any conditions, and then again, like I mentioned, this commission can add any conditions to that. Also, we would prefer sustainability and affordability for long-term growth within these core neighborhoods. As these areas have seen, some of the structures are well over 100 years old. When we replace them, we would prefer them to last again 100 years if possible. So with all that being said, going forward, like I said, is before you tonight for recommendation to City Council, which is the 9th, and the ordinance potentially would be adopted on the 10th. This would just be added to the existing multifamily design manual. And then with that being said, new development occurring in January of 2020, if it was approved, that would be the first review if we get a proposal in. Staff would communicate this with the neighborhood associations like we have done. They were notified of this meeting and council. We will also notify the developers, the typical ones that do redevelopment or infill development. And then also we'll reach out to the architects within the community that mostly does the proposals. With that being said, Mr. Allen and myself are available for questions. He's been involved since the beginning of this project as well. So with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions or concerns that we may have as a commission.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the commission? Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. Not so much a question here, but I'd like to compliment you guys for putting this together. I think it's an excellent document, and it will be a good tool for the Plan Commission and for the neighborhood associations. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, Commissioner Christopherson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Petrie, this is, again, I have to ask your patience with educating me because I've not been part of the process as this has come forward. But would you give me an example of some of the creative ways that developments that don't have an alley access would deal with either the garage or the on-street parking?
Sure, excellent question. So if it didn't have an alley, now most of the core neighborhoods do have an alley, in particular Third Ward and Randall Park and also Eastside Hill. Some of the proposals, they could do either a detached garage, which it would be to the side of the house, because typically these lots are a little smaller. And the way to access it is along the side of the house, and then you access it to the back. To do a attached garage, you could probably do a side entry garage potentially. I'm just thinking of the most recent house that was built in Third Ward, which was one of the last infill lots. They put it on the side of the house, and then that was actually attached, I believe. So there is some flexibility with that. Now, if it's a single family or a two family, potentially this commission wouldn't even see it. But if they were to propose, say a duplex was proposed and it had 2-stall garage in the front for each unit, this commission would have to review that because it would not meet these standards potentially. So it's up to the staff to make the interpretation for a duplex, but most of the 4 units, 6 units, 8 units do not even have garages proposed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Greiger.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Petrie, for all of your work on this. And I guess, I wasn't involved in the very initial discussions either, so this is a pretty basic question, I think. But so in determining the what is considered a core neighborhood or established neighborhood, there's a number of them that are called out, obviously. But is it really up to the commission ultimately to decide what kind of neighborhood would these standards would apply to? For example, if there is kind of a patchwork of older neighborhoods on the very north side of the city, for example, is it pretty flexible as to how the Plan Commission decides to use these standards?
That is correct. In the end, it's up to the commission. We try to word it as clearly as possible and still with flexibility. So we typically put in proximity to downtown, including but not limited to. The way we do that is, so for example, if you're talking, Upper West Side, if they had a 4-unit proposed or even probably a duplex proposed, these standards could apply to that. And that we would bring that proposal in front of this commission to make the interpretation of this guidelines and multifamily design manual currently. It would be left up to this commission to make that interpretation and what kind of design elements should be proposed, and is it appropriate to fit in with the existing neighborhood? So that's an excellent question, though. But we have the flexibility. We try to word it so it leaves up interpretation of this commission.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for the staff? All right, I don't see any. Thank you. Nice work. This is a public hearing. Is there any members of the public who came to speak on this item tonight? I see none, so I'll entertain a motion if there is one. Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. I will move approval.
Great. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Wolfgram, thank you. Any discussion? Commissioner Peterson.
I too have been around for a long time with this, and I think they have put together, you know, what we feel we need to apply, what is best for these areas, based on their input from the different neighborhood associations and the builders alike. I know there's been conflict in the past, and I think this will give any infill proposals a little bit more guidance to go by, so that when they do come to us, we won't have those rejections like we've had in the past.
Okay, I agree. Any other comments? Commissioner Wolfgram? Okay. All right. So we will call the question. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great. Thank you. Good work. Item number 4 is for public discussion for recommendation to the City Council and approval of an annexation on Lausanne Avenue adjacent to the North Crossing. Mr. Allen.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. This is a request or petition to annex a small piece of vacant land to the city of Eau Claire located on Lausanne Avenue adjacent to the North Crossing. Oops, sorry. More specifically, it's item number 4 you can see there, far northwest part of the city in that general vicinity. You can see the extent of the proposed annexation here. It's listed as Alpine Road. Again, it's more of an extension of Lausanne Avenue across the North Crossing. It is currently in the town of Union. It is vacant. The applicant is Menard Inc. They're present here this evening and hopefully can provide some additional information on their proposed future use connection to this property in question. It's only 0.12 acres of land. It is, again, vacant and, of course, located within the sewer service area of the city of Eau Claire. Water and sanitary sewer are available along the street there in this area. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan as presented. There are no land use changes as proposed at this time, but defer to the applicant to kind of further explain future considerations related to this. So with that, stand for any questions.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Granlund.
I'm kind of wondering what the boundary of it is. One edge of it appears to be the boundary that belongs to Menards, and the other somewhere between that and the right-of-way of the road. Is that correct? I have not found an independent parcel boundary on our plan. It seems to be although it's empty of any construction, it appears to be within the right-of-way or not?
Right, it's kind of along the edge of the right-of-way, so I'll defer to the applicant to further clarify that, if I may.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions for staff?
Thank you.
I see none. Thank you. And is the applicant here? Hi. Welcome.
All right, Nick Brenner, 5101 Menard Drive. To answer your question, this piece here is not identified or broken out on the GIS yet. This was actually vacated by the town of Union probably last March. The resolution and ordinance just got finished probably in July. So it's taken a while to get to this point, but it was excess right-of-way that we petitioned the township to vacate. They ended up doing that. The point of this is to incorporate it into the property next to it, create a little bit bigger lot. We don't have, excuse me, we don't have any planned uses for the lot at this point, but it was pretty tight. We have some power lines running through it, so we figured that a little bit more property will go a long ways to make this a little bit easier to develop and go from the future. So there is a little portion that is in the city that we will next month be coming forward for the city to vacate. It's just an extension of the blue PCC there. So that will be in front of you next month, I believe.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? I see none. Thank you. Is there a motion then to move this item?
I'll move approval.
Commissioner Granlund?
And I'll second it.
Commissioner Peterson? Any discussion? All right, then we'll call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. Thank you. Item number 5 is a public discussion, again for recommendation to City Council to recommend approval of an underground easement west of Western Avenue. Ms. Ness.
Good evening. Item number 5 is located in the middle of the map, kind of the north portion, just west of Hastings Way. To give a little more closer look at it, it's located just west of Western Avenue, west of North Hastings Way, north of Seymour Road. And on behalf of Wisconsin Bell Services, MyTech Services is requesting the easement for the underground utilities. It's an extension of fiber to some new properties along the west side of Western Avenue, so providing an upgraded and new service to parcels along Western Avenue. My next slide kind of zooms in a little more, and this is the map that they provided to us for the service extension. The easement is 12 feet, and it's located along city land that is next to the trail. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, any questions from the commission? I see none. Thank you. And the city is
We are supportive of the easement.
yeah, okay. Is the applicant, doesn't look like the applicant is here.
No.
Which is fine. And so this is public discussion, so we'll see if there's a motion. Commissioner Granlund?
I'll move approval.
Thank you.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Commissioner Gregor? Any discussion? I don't see any. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? And so, item number 6, for discussion and direction, any code compliance items? And Mr. Allen has a brief comment on future agenda items.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We currently do not have any agenda items identified for the next meeting here in December, December 16th, so 2 weeks from tonight. At your discretion, we can consider canceling that meeting. I know in previous years, as it's been described to me, this is only my second December here at the City of Eau Claire, so I'm not sure if 2 years in a row makes a tradition, but there's been some past practices of the Plan Commission perhaps gathering for more informal event or activity. But again, nothing planned and nothing anticipated or expected, just offering that as a possibility should the meeting be canceled.
Okay. Do we need a motion and a vote to cancel a meeting?
That would be preferred. That'd be preferable to have that formally canceled, yes.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson is ready.
I'll make a motion to cancel the meeting.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Brenholm. All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One more chance to oppose. All right. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? I see none. So without objection, this meeting is adjourned.
Well done.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.